Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Midwestern Marx live stream. Good to be back with you. Got a little Sunday live stream today. I got the purple lights going on in the background. I don't know why it's a purple kind of day today. Actually, when I looked up pictures of AOC and Ben Shabibo to make this thumbnail, I noticed they both had a picture on Wikimedia Commons where you can get free stock images. They both had a picture where it looked like they were glowing purple. So I figured I'd make a purple thumbnail and make our lights purple today. It's a purple kind of day. Go Vikings. Go Dewhawks, I guess. Hello, Pedamio. Welcome to the stream. Today we got a lot of great stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about some interesting stuff, as in some stuff that we don't normally discuss. Go into some. I've got some clips from like the Joe Rogan experience that we're going to react to. We've got former Marine who helped lie us into the Iraq War, talking about how he regrets it. Similar to that video we reacted to the other day about, what was it about? It was about all the Iraq veterans who were looking back 20 years later and regretting their experience. And I was talking about how I feel bad for them. And, you know, we can reach these people, these disaffected veterans with socialism. But with this video, it's a little bit different. You know, this is one of the people who helped lie us into the war, and I'm less willing to accept the apology of people like that rather than, you know, troops who were in low-income, rougher areas and got recruited into the military and then deployed. You know, that's a lot different than a military higher up, or helped lie us into the war, and then 20 years later is like, oh, sorry about it. So we'll also talk about the TikTok hearing, how corporate media has reacted to the absurd TikTok congressional hearing. We'll, of course, watch Ben Shapiro call AOC a fascist. Talk about wrestling a little bit. Talk about the Hadza tribe and primitive communism, as Marx and Engels would call it. And then we'll talk about some news and discuss China and Russia's new strategic partnership, as well as the probably incoming financial crisis and collapse of the banking system that's gonna make us all even poorer than we already are. So yeah, I hope you're all looking forward to it. We'll get after it right after this intro. All right. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you for checking out the stream. Hope you enjoyed our fantastic intro. Got a lot of people giving their opinions on AOC already. A lot of people checking in. Hello, Jacob. Hello, Malcolm. Hello, SI. Got some new faces. Got some familiar faces. Eddie, I matched with a girl on Tinder, and the first thing she asked me was, "Are you a tanky? Do I proceed with caution or abort the mission?" You got to figure out what she means, right? You never know what someone means until you ask them. So you just got to be like, maybe ask her, how do you define tanky? I mean, definitely don't abort the mission. Like, she might be asking you that because she's a tanky, right? She might be using the word tanky as like a compliment. So definitely don't abort the mission if, you know, you're into this girl. Just proceed with caution. You know, that's the best option. Keep an open mind, and, you know, maybe maybe she's not a tanky, but maybe she's tanky curious. Maybe she's one of these, yeah, I like socialism because it sounds good, but I haven't taken the time to research existing socialist countries and propaganda. So I think that, socialism has never been tried, or every time it's tried, it's failed. And you can show her otherwise. You can teach her about China's poverty alleviation programs. You can teach her about the Belt and Road, all these things. Or maybe she's like a scholar and she's a tanky and she's going to start teaching you stuff, right? You never know. So just proceed with caution. I got out a year after 9/11. Enlisted service turned me into a leftist. 2008 turned me socialist, going nowhere but left since. Makes sense. Yeah, there's a lot of this. I mean, thank you for sharing your story, because for one, there's a lot of people who are resistant to admitting that they're military veterans on the left because they don't want to get lambasted for serving imperialism, even though most leftists got turned into leftists or socialists by the military, by their time in the service. But it goes to the point that I was making on the last stream, which was like 3-4 days ago now, that vets and even active military personnel who are disaffected with the military are ripe for socialist organizing. So thank you. And you said that in 2008, it made you a socialist. Like, we're probably headed for another financial collapse, another, as I said, total collapse of the U.S. Western banking system, with Biden just recently bailing out Signature and Silicon Valley banks, two of the biggest funders of technological and pharmaceutical capital, which dominates our current economy. So the regulators straight up said if we didn't bail out these banks, it's likely that the whole economy would have come crashing down because of the financial system. So yeah, I'm sure that'll turn a lot more people socialist. Good advice. Thank you, comrade. You bet. Good luck. Good luck. I became a communist last year. Now I'm trying to convert my wife. LOL. You will get there. You will get her. I guarantee it. As long as she's working class. I've been unmatched because of reading communist theory. Yeah, I definitely don't lead with that. When I was single, I wouldn't lead with like, I am a communist. And my current girlfriend, I didn't even tell. I'm just like, I'm pro-labor. I'm pro-working class. Like I hate like the Democrats and the Republicans. And then she would ask me questions about politics, like what's going on in Ukraine. And I would explain it from my perspective. And then I would explain what the Democrats and the Republicans are saying about it. And she thought what I was saying was more rational. And then, like 2-3 months into us dating, she's like, wait, so you're like a socialist or a communist, right? But by that point, socialism and communism made a lot of sense to her because I had been explaining it without using the words for like 3 months. So some more advice for you on how to recruit your partners. I want to start with this clip today from the Joe Rogan Experience, because I am the communist Joe Rogan after all, right? That is my role on the left, is just to be a meathead, to keep wrestling and lifting weights, and then streaming and doing podcasts and talking about socialism. And eventually I'll go bald. I will host the show Fear Factor, like a weird communist version of the show Fear Factor, and I'll fully embrace my role as the communist Joe Rogan. But for now, I'm still transitioning into that role. So I thought it would be interesting to listen to this Joe Rogan clip. I mean, it was obviously not just because it's Joe Rogan, but because there's so many times on the Joe Rogan Experience where he starts to drift into socialism, into leftism. Like, there's a reason he had Bernie Sanders on his podcast, and after he talked to Bernie, he ended up endorsing him. And he didn't end up voting for him in the primary because he wasn't a registered Democrat, which shows, how undemocratic and ridiculous the primary process is. But he always drifts into like economic leftism, but he's someone who's made it, right? He's someone who's rich himself and basically lives the life that he wants to live. So it's, that's the block from him becoming an actual socialist, right? There's no material incentive for him to become a socialist. But he realizes the problems with capitalism a lot. So this is another example of that.
It's one of my favorite quotes ever because it's true. And I've been that guy. You're just in this world where you just can't wait to just run away.
And how do people get stuck there?
Bills.
Bills, like financial bills?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Bills and commitment. You have an apartment you have to pay for. You have a car you leased. You have a wife that you have to feed. You have a child you have to raise. You have your mortgage. You have your this. You have your that. And that's where it all comes from. The way you can change is you have to put aside enough money to give yourself a window. And then you have to have a plan. And you have to spend all your waking hours outside of whatever shit job you do planning your escape. And you have to come to the realization very clearly that you fucked up and you got yourself stuck. So whatever you're doing, you have to do it like your life depends on it. Whatever time that you have to attack like you're trying to save the world that most men live.
So it's socialistic sentiment mixed in with that capitalist ethic, mixed up in with the pull yourself up by your bootstraps ethic. He's basically saying that bills and mortgage payments and all the different payments that we're straddled with in capitalism that we need to make to survive are what's killing us, are what makes people depressed, are what gets people in a rut, are what prevents people from living their dreams and, living their happy, fulfilling life. They just start drowning under these bills until you're stuck and, you're just working to fulfill your commitments. But, his solution is just set aside money, right? If you can save enough money to have your material needs met and have everything you want and live comfortably, then, you can get out of this rut. So what do? You not only spend all of your day getting exploited at work, but then you come home and you grind until you can save up enough money to actually live a fulfilling life in this system. And first of all, from a social perspective, it's impossible for everyone to do that. It's impossible for everyone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Otherwise, there will be nobody to work in the manufacturing jobs. There will be nobody to work on the railroad. There will be nobody to work these honorable but very difficult jobs, right? So it shouldn't be like we need to just escape these, because somebody needs to do those jobs, and those jobs are honorable. They're necessary for our society, right? So we should treat the people who do those jobs better. We should only make them work 4 to 6 hours a day, pay them enough to survive, ensure that they have health care, give them access to other cultural and community type things, so that they can develop themselves and do things that are enjoyable outside of the workplace, right? These are all the things that go along with constructing socialism. And this is such, that can bring liberation for the entire working mass. And that's what these folks like Joe Rogan, who have pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, who have made it, and he comes from a construction family, or his dad was like, maybe his dad owned a construction company, or he was a foreman. I don't know if he was a worker, but either way, Joe Rogan's found a way to make it. So then his solution for everyone else just becomes do what I did. Right. Well, not everybody's, got the ability to do comedy, or not everybody has the desire to be an actor or whatever. Some people just want to work and, have enough to survive and spend as much time with their family as possible. That's a lot of working people. Right. So the solution isn't for all those working people to abandon their families, right? Rather than going home and spending time with your family after work, you spend time and grind. You go into your office and grind. You don't get married or have kids because that's too much commitment and monetary financial commitment. You got to spend that time grinding, spend that money on, saving money, so you can actually live a fulfilling life at some point in the future. So it's as usual with Joe Rogan, him realizing the issues with capitalism, him realizing the alienation people face, him realizing how debt and finance capital traps people in one spot and traps them in a rut, doing something that they don't find fulfilling personally, and prevents them from developing and doing things that they would rather be doing. But his solution is, of course, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. His solution isn't let's have the working class seize the government, seize the means of production from the parasitic oligarchs on Wall Street and these handful of giant banks that own everything. who make millions and millions and millions of dollars and charge us are the ones making money off of our mortgage and off of our bill payments and off of our debt payments. Seize the economy and the political system from them and build one that makes sense for the workers. Build one where you don't have to grind 20 hours a day in order to escape and eventually live a fulfilling life, where everybody lives a fulfilling life, where everybody at least has the opportunity to do so. That's the solution. Joe is so cringe, LMAO. He can be. There's one video where he talks about how like he physically couldn't do the 9-to-5 job. He realized when he was young, like, I can't do the 9-to-5. I need to make it. I need to make money and do something I enjoy, like being a comedian or an actor. I just can't sit in a desk or work for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And it's like, yeah, you say that now because you've made it as a comedian, right? But what if you didn't make it and you got married and you had a couple kids and you needed to get a construction job or whatever to put food on the table for them, right? And he talks about that like it's the worst thing ever to be a working class person in this country, which, you know, you are getting exploited and alienated. So a lot of the things he recognizes are legitimate and real. But if your kids and your family's reliant on you and your own survival is reliant on you working the 9-to-5, you're probably going to do it, right? You're probably going to suck it up, and it is going to be terrible. It's going to be soul sucking. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be alienated. You're going to feel like I'd rather, you know, I just want to run and jump out of the window of my office today. But you're going to keep doing it because you got to put food on the table for your kids and you want to give them a better life. Right? That's what my parents did. That's what a lot of my friends' parents did. And it's honorable. And we should build a system that allows those working people to flourish and live fulfilling lives, right? Not a system where, you know, you need to escape the working class in order to be fulfilled. Hey, y'all. Hey, Duck Hash Browns. How are you? YouTube member. Got that nice little symbol. MFs get a little money and then forget about the working class and all the people still at rock bottom. Yeah, have y'all ever known somebody who like marries into money or stumbles into money? It is, and I don't begrudge anyone who does that, of course, you know, it is what it is, but like even, you know, I'm not saying everybody who marries into money or, you know, stumbles upon money after being poor their whole life immediately becomes a bad person, right? They might still be nice, but they just become disconnected so fast, right? Once you get used to this mode of life where you have all your material needs met, you never really have to worry about money. You just become used to that, and it becomes impossible to empathize consistently with the majority of society who is not living like that, who, you know, is living paycheck to paycheck, who is drowning in debt and trying to get by every day and pay rent and bills every month. You just totally forget what that's like because you don't have to worry about it. So you're worried about what? Other things, your kids, you know, what you want to do that day, your career, your dreams, blah, 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 whatever else, because you're not constantly worried about the rent and paying the bills. So you just kind of forget what that's like. And you forget that everybody else is basically shackled by the big banks and by the giant utility companies and by the landlords. Petite bourgeois suckers that think they made it. Yeah, it's like the Andrew Tate philosophy. Carlos and I were talking about that the other day. He's just, you know, all these bourgeois or the bourgeois class, they're terrible. These big bankers and Wall Street executive or Wall Street oligarchs and big executives at these giant companies, they're terrible. Right? You got to make it, and you got to do it by starting a small business, by doing your own thing. And meanwhile, he was doing sex trafficking. I mean, innocent until proven guilty, but it seems like that's what his business was, his pulling himself up by his bootstraps. But, you know, if Andrew Tate was one of those Wall Street executives, this is what Carlos said, if Andrew Tate was born into a giant banking family, he would love the bourgeoisie. He would love being part of the ruling class, right? It's just because he's not part of that class. He's petty bourgeois. He's like, I made it. I'm the best. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and screw those people above me. It's his philosophy is entirely based on his class position. Same with Joe Rogan, right? Yeah, the big banks and the big Wall Street shareholders are bad. and they screw people, and there's exploitation and alienation of working people. That being said, you just got to work more and pull yourself up by your bootstraps so you can be like me. It's a total reflection of their class position as petty bourgeoisie. The proletariat needs to grow some balls. Maybe. Definitely got to stand up for itself. There's that threshold where more money doesn't make you happy, and it's because you no longer worry about your needs being met. After that, it's just accumulating. Yeah, studies have shown, which it's difficult to quantify happiness, right? Which is, people always talk about those studies where Scandinavian countries have the highest rates of happiness. Like, I think self-reported happiness is, it can be a useful data point, but obviously it's not perfect because it's a qualitative thing. So it's hard to quantify. But studies have shown that your happiness and your contentment goes up with your income, up till about $10,000. Till about $100,000 a year. It goes up, and then it starts to plateau. Because at $100,000 a year, you pretty much have your needs met somewhat comfortably. You can live in a fairly nice home. You can save some money every year. You can pay for your kids, probably your kids' sports too. Money's not going to be this huge worry. And every decision's not going to be this, super important financial decision. Can we afford this Hulu subscription? Right? Can we afford to send our kid to karate practice or gymnastics practice if we continue to pay this YouTube TV subscription or whatever? No, we can't. All right, we're going to get rid of our subscriptions and cut back. And every decision has to be, thought through like that from an economic perspective. Whereas, if you have about $100,000, that's the point where you still have to budget and be smart, and, especially if you want to save your money. But a single person in a household making $100,000, usually, at least with inflation, it's changing, of course, but it's enough to be somewhat comfortable. And that's what brings people happiness, not having to worry about, rent, not having to worry, will I have enough money for bills? Yeah. Speaking of which, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/MidwesternMarx. Because my bills are due tomorrow. Just kidding. I'm good. They are due tomorrow, but that's not why you should support us on Patreon. Happy Sunday. Thank you. Happy Sunday. I saved money from my work since 2020. Then last year the work ended and I basically lost all savings while looking for new work. Yes, that happens very often too. That happened to one of my buddies. He had saved a decent amount of money from the military and from his work, and then he had surgery and couldn't work for a little bit, and there went his savings, and that's why you're supposed to have an emergency fund as well as your savings, but that obviously requires more income and less spending, which is the hard part about budgeting and saving money. Bills need to be paid, absolutely. In the Netherlands, petite bourgeois are also complaining about the prices. I'm not surprised. The inflation crisis is wild. Inflation is out of control right now, and the Fed has no way, at least in the US, no way of going about stopping it, right? They have no serious solutions for stopping inflation. Nothing like we're going to nationalize some major this would be huge, obviously, but nothing like we're going to nationalize some major industries and make sure that the prices aren't artificially inflated, right? And a lot of those industries like steel or the mining industries or oil or whatever, if you decrease the prices, it's going to decrease the prices of everything else because those commodities go into other commodities, go into the process of production. So you could do that. But of course, that's not what they're going to do. All they're going to do is jack up interest rates to slow investment, which is going to, it's going to slow investment. It'll slow inflation slightly, but all it's doing is, putting a tiny little stopgap, preventing inflation from going whoosh. It slows it down by contracting the economy or by stopping the economy from expanding and capital from being invested at breakneck speeds. But it's not going to stop the crisis. It's not going to stop inflation totally, which is I mean, people have asked me too. I did that recent article about neoclassical economics. People have said, is there anything that you can glean from neoclassical economics? Like, is there anything useful that comes from the field? And I think like they've realized stuff like if the Fed, they've realized different methods of maintaining capitalism, right? Like if the Fed changes interest rates, that'll have an effect on inflation, right? It'll slow the increase of inflation. And I mean, it is good to know that, right? And that's something that neoclassical economics devised, I'm pretty sure. It might have been Keynesian economics, though. So who knows? But that's the only good thing that's come from neoclassical economics. Milton Friedman style economics is just different ways of maintaining capitalism longer, different ways of, staving off the crises longer so we can keep investing, keep making profits before we have to deal with a crash. So that's essentially what the field of economics is nowadays, is how do we maintain capitalism and keep it going? Very interesting. All right, let's get into the Ben Shabibo video, and then we'll talk about the TikTok hearing, because that's really interesting too. But well, I was pretty surprised when I searched Ben Shabibo. I just searched his name on YouTube to see what he was up to, see if he had anything good to react to. And this is what I saw. This thumbnail. I'm like, oh, AOC's a fascist, huh? I thought it was the leftists who called everybody they don't like fascist. I mean, AOC is continually voting for funding the Ukraine proxy war, NATO's proxy war against Russia, where NATO is utilizing far-right extremist fascistic groups to do their bidding and kill as many Russians as possible before the war ends. But I don't think that's why Ben Shapiro is going to call her a fascist. I don't know why he is. I actually haven't even seen this video, but let's check it out. It's sure to be interesting. It's not sure to be interesting, but it might be interesting. So here we go.
Well, folks, the congressional Democrats, they would love nothing better than to indoctrinate your kids with a bunch of garbage. And they think you're a fascist if you want to stop them. In the name of free speech, what you are seeing is the left saying that parents should not have authority, local schools should not even have authority. The people who really should have authority are people like them. And this means indoctrinating your kids into a bunch of gobbledygook nonsense that runs directly counter to reason. Because the more you can get people to evidence, buy-in to a peculiar ideology, the more you have alienated them from the institutions that really are the repressive institutions of society. When I say that there are people at the top of our political institutions who wish to obliterate all of the intermediate institutions, you can see that in action, in the unwillingness to suggest that there should be anything that parents can keep off limits to their kids. Parental authority should be removed and the experts should decide. There's a clip that was rocketing around the internet yesterday for good reason. There's a woman named Nadine Johnson at a group called PEN America. Well, Nadine Johnson was testifying, and a representative named Hageman, I believe from Wisconsin, was questioning her. And she was questioning her about Nadine Johnson's position, that it was some form of censorship to exercise discretion in what exactly was allowed in school libraries, which of course has been a matter of public debate for a very long time. Right? You don't want everything in school libraries. Kids shouldn't have access to everything in school libraries. But Nadine Johnson is the managing director of PEN America. PEN America is the organization that is dedicated to school librarians. It is according to their website, PEN America is the largest of more than 100 centers worldwide that make up the PEN International Network, working to ensure people everywhere have the freedom to create literature, to convey information, to express their views, to access the views, ideas, and literature of others. They're supposedly a free speech group. Well, this leader of PEN America was asked about whether it is censorship to bar small children from seeing Penthouse in the school library, and she couldn't just answer the question. It's amazing.
Well, folks, do you believe it is censorship to prohibit teachers from exposing first graders?
All right, first of all, we got to talk about this. I didn't even realize this, but somebody in the chat did. They spelled fascist wrong. It says F-A-C-I-S-T. There's supposed to be an S in there, right? How much money does Ben Shapiro's team get paid? I'm sure he has producers and editors. They can't even spell the word right? Come on. Even Midwestern Marx doesn't usually make mistakes like that, and it's just like me, Carlos, Noah, and our friend Kyle editing all these videos. Come on, Daily Wire team, what the hell?
To Penthouse magazine.
Do I believe it is censorship? I'm sorry, ma'am. Do I believe it's censorship to?
Do you believe it is censorship to prohibit teachers from exposing first graders to Penthouse magazine?
I don't know of any instances in which a.
That isn't my question. My question is, do you believe that it is censorship to prohibit teachers from exposing first graders to Penthouse magazine?
I believe that it is important that we have parents, teachers, and educators.
You are not going to
involved.
answer my question then, is that right?
And the answer is she's not going to answer the question. That was Republican Representative Harriet Hageman of Wyoming, who was grilling the PEN America spokesperson right there. The left believes that parents should not have the ability to ban Penthouse magazine from a school library because, after all, it is the experts who should make that designation, which is how you end up with the idiocy of.
What the heck is Penthouse magazine? I should figure that out. Penthouse magazine is a men's fashion, Penthouse is a men's magazine founded by Bob Guccione and published by Los Angeles-based Penthouse World Media. It combines urban lifestyle articles and softcore pornographic pictures of women that in the 1990s evolved into hardcore. Oh. Yeah. Why not just say you'll ban those in schools? I don't get it. I don't get it. Why not just say, yeah, we'll ban these? I'm so out of it with the culture war. Like, is this what's going on in the culture war? Are the liberals arguing like we need pornography in school libraries, and the Republicans are like, no, and also we should ban being gay too, because that's, kids are getting these ideas from their school libraries where they're indoctrinated by the liberals. It's all so silly. It's so dang silly. I can't believe Hassan Piker spent so much time talking about this culture war stuff.
The irrepressibly stupid Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, so fresh, so face, freshness and faceness, all in one package of fresh faceness, ranting and raving on the floor of the House about parental oversight of K through 12 schools and suggesting that the Parental Rights in Education bill in Florida, for example, is an example of fascism. That's right. It's now an example of fascism to mandate that students not be indoctrinated in wild left-wing garbage, with the parents standing behind that message. Only people like AOC, only childless people like AOC should decide how kids learn.
They are.
Also, once when I was in middle school, I read a couple books about wrestling, actually, and both of them had like insanely graphic like sex scenes. And I showed them to the teacher, and the books got taken away and got removed from the library. So I don't know. I feel like this isn't a new debate. Like in the 2000s, you had Republican hardcore evangelical Christians burning Harry Potter books, saying there shouldn't be Harry Potter books in schools because they, promote witchcraft and demonic stuff and spirits, blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, it's not a new thing to be debating which books are allowed in schools. I mean, there's been a huge debate over, what's the book? Huckleberry Finn, right? Whether that should be allowed in schools because it has white people who say the N-word. So this is not a new debate. I just don't see the purpose of that Penthouse magazine being in a school. It seems like something that probably shouldn't be, that isn't probably appropriate for schools, but they're acting like this is a new thing. Ben's acting like this is a new thing. These liberals, these fascist liberals are coming in and trying to, put sex scenes in our school libraries. Like, it's always been a thing. It happened to me in 6th grade. I read a sex scene and they took it out of the school library. And, there's always been this debate about what books should be allowed in schools. Right, but these political commentators have to make their money off of stirring up drama, have to make it as hyperbolic as possible. The liberals are literally fascists. They're fascists trying to force your kids to watch porn so they can convert them to the LGBTQ community. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's what's going on.
You should decide how kids learn.
They are asking the Republican Party to keep culture wars out of classrooms. Our children need urgent and aggressive educational solutions. The American Library Association coming out against this Republican proposal. When we talk about progressive values, I can say what my progressive value is, and that is freedom over fascism.
Freedom over it's fascism.
Hey, there's some culture war hyperbole from AOC, too. I guess it was her calling the Republicans fascist. And to be fair, like Ron DeSantis's bill that was supposed to just, monitor what kids are reading in schools and make sure everything's age appropriate, has been targeting like African American studies classes, like high level classes about the history of African American culture in the United States. It's been censoring stuff like that. And that is authoritarianism. I mean, that is terrible. That's the government acting as a racist arm of censorship, censoring education about the bad things in our country's history, which is exactly what a lot of people worried, was going to happen when the Republicans started coming after the education system and the school system, and calling teachers groomers and stuff. So, a lot of these laws have been enforced in a really dictatorial way, which I'm sure Ben Shapiro won't talk about here. He'll just talk about the Penthouse magazine stuff. But yeah, a lot of hyperbole going around. Thank you so much, Pat Cummins, for the super sticker. I would love to come on your show again, Pat, or have you and Greg on Midwestern Marx. That would be awesome. I just used some of your hot sauce, or your son's hot sauce again the other day. So solidarity. Thanks for watching the show, and thanks for the financial support there. Chaya Bat Zvi. Thank you so much for the $5.50 from California. The right wing in the U.S. is dying, so they prioritize short-term outrage plus conspiracy theories over long-term policy making in order to stir up their base. They definitely do, and that's like the method of making money for people like Ben Shapiro, right? They've really systematized, making clickbait stories, making clickbait videos, clickbait articles that are going to draw people's attention. Like this one drew my attention because it looked like he was calling AOC a fascist. And then it turns out, we watched the video, maybe it's AOC calling the Republicans fascist, whatever. But that drama draws your eyes. It draws people's attention. And that's part of the, I'm trying to do more of that for Midwestern Marx, even to raise our public profile and to draw people in to Midwestern Marx. So then we can bring them to our more theoretical, our content that I feel is more important and educational. But if your goal isn't actually to educate people, if your goal isn't actually to organize people for socialism and create a better world like Ben Shapiro, and your whole goal is to support the Republican Party and make money, why not just talk about drama and culture wars all freaking day? Why not? It's going to get views. It's going to keep people from thinking about the real class issues, the real material problems facing our country, and that's your whole job. It's perfect. So the culture war is such an easy way for the ruling class to keep us polarized and for pundits like Shabibo to make money. Thank you for the super stickers and the super chats, y'all. Much love. Answer this question real quick, and then we'll jump back in. I wanted to be a high school teacher, but quickly realized I would never be able to get away with teaching what must be taught, whether I teach public or private or charter. Really, it'd be interesting to hear what subject you were teaching, because... yeah, I've always wanted to know. I've got a buddy who's a Marxist-Leninist who's a history teacher, and I know he works a lot of Marxism-Leninism into the way he teaches history. And he's quiet about it, but he'll just ask kids questions, So the U.S. did this in Vietnam. Do you think that was right? Do you think that was justified? Do you think the Vietnamese deserved this? Do you think they deserve to be destroyed with Agent Orange and napalm and have their agricultural facilities or their agricultural land and their infrastructure destroyed by bombs for trying to build a socialist system, for trying to do their own political system? Just ask kids questions that lead them to sort of common sense answers that push them towards Marxism. But yeah, I've always wondered how controlled the education system is. My dad teaches Spanish at the high school level, and he shows videos about like Cuba and does readings about Cuba and El Salvador and the struggle for socialism in these places and the repressive actions of the government to prevent it. But it's Spanish, so it's less like the focus is on the language, so I feel like you can get away with more. I'd love to see Eddie cover the new Parents' Bill of Rights. All right, maybe I will. I'll write that down. Thank you.
For parents to control the education of their children. The bill that she's ranting against is the Parents' Bill of Rights Act of 2021, which would establish the rights of parents and guardians regarding the elementary or secondary school education of their minor children. It specifically prohibits a state from denying certain rights to a parent or guardian of a minor child regarding the child's education, which includes, among others, the right.
Does this dude have a mug that says leftist tears? Oh my. The grifting is unbelievable. This shows how serious Ben Shapiro is. It's like that guy on TikTok who doxed me and then sold a mug that said Eddie's tears. And everyone was like, obviously this guy is just a grifter who's trying to use drama to make money. That's how I see Ben Shapiro's leftist tears mug.
Right to fully review and make copies of the curricula, books, and other educational materials used by the child's school, access information on teachers, guest lecturers, and outside presenters, access school records, and visit the child during school hours. That apparently is what she's very upset about, the possibility that a parent might actually know what's going on inside the classroom. That is an aspect of fascism. Meanwhile, you have Jamie Raskin, the representative from Maryland, doing the same routine, suggesting that Republicans are attempting to ban 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale, which is amazing since 1984 and The Handmaid's Tale are literally available at every bookstore in America everywhere.
2 years ago, more than 1,600 books were banned in the United States of America.
They're trying to ban 1984? No. Now that is a sign that we truly live in 1984. I mean, realistically, the NED is publishing articles talking about how the business community and how the private sector needs to get more involved with information. They call it investing in facts. So here, this is from the National Endowment for Democracy, which of course is essentially a private version of the CIA that was created by Ronald Reagan to do his imperialist bidding while taking heat off of the CIA, because people were beginning to see how horrible and imperialist that organization is. The U.S. intelligence agencies are. So that's how we got the National Endowment for Democracy. But either way, look at this article. New report, Investing in Facts, how the business community can support a healthy infosphere. So how the capitalist class can alter and control the information that we get in order to support what the NED, the National Endowment for Democracy, considers truth, which is, of course, whatever's good for Western finance capitalists and whatever's best for the U.S. government. Everything that the NED doesn't think is truth is just Russian propaganda straight from Putin. And that's why they're calling upon capitalists to start doing more censorship. So there are issues of censorship, mostly in the service of imperialism, right? We've obviously had 7 of our TikTok accounts taken down after TikTok was given, management of US TikTok was given to a Texas-based company called Oracle, who has former NATO operatives and former State Department operatives managing their content. So there is a ton of censorship going on right now of anti-war voices. You have the FBI, obviously pressuring Facebook, the Hamilton 68 dashboard, and the Washington think tank made up of a bunch of people who helped lie us into the Iraq war, who were trying to censor a bunch of Twitter accounts, falsely claiming that they were Russian bots. Tons of examples of censorship. But what the culture war goons like Shapiro and AOC are focused on, and not to say that the education system doesn't matter, but they're just focused on these hyperbolic stories about, a certain book being banned, or, the Democrats are coming after a certain book, even if, realistically it's not going to be banned. And AOC called the Republicans a fascist for this. So let's talk about that for 15 minutes and how evil AOC is. And all it's doing is driving polarization, focusing on the most hyperbolic portions of these issues without ever getting to the substance, which is the fact that our government is controlled by the capitalist class. Our government is a dictatorship of capital with a monopoly on violence. The government's the only one allowed to use violence. And they're controlled by the capitalist class, and they suppress revolutionary and working class organizing and try and control the information. That's the core. That's the substance here. But you'll never hear Ben Shapiro say that. You'll never hear AOC say that. All right. It's just the Republicans are way worse than us. The Democrats are way worse than us. They're fascists. No, you're fascist. You're trying to censor this. Yeah, well, you're trying to censor that. And it keeps people divided. It keeps people fighting. And it keeps people from seeing the core of the issue, the dictatorship of capital that is our government.
Here are 3 of the key books that the right-wingers have been going after. The Handmaid's Tale. Margaret Atwood's extraordinary dystopian novel about a right-wing misogynist movement which uses high technology and depraved religious ideas.
Is this guy wearing a do-rag? I kind of like it.
Theology to control not only the minds of their followers, but the private and public lives and the fertility.
He has cancer. Yeah, I kind of figured. I'm sorry. Wish him the best with that, of course. I figured that's why he was wearing that. But
Of women. And of course, George Orwell's 1984, because they have no sense of irony. They're always trying to censor this one.
that book should be censored just because it sucks. Like, kids shouldn't be reading Orwell just because he was a bad writer. And he himself was an intelligence asset. Especially towards the end of his life, he was an asset of MI6 in the British State Department. But the Republicans have no problem with that, right? They have no problem with State Department books being all over the libraries and indoctrinating kids. It's only when the government now tries to intervene in education that it's bad. And where these Republicans are so mad about the Democrats canceling 1984. Like, what about Ron DeSantis in Florida attacking like African American studies, like college level courses? Like, shouldn't you be more mad about that? But the Republicans, you know, when the Democrats do censorship, it's wrong. And then the Democrats, when the Republicans do censorship, it's wrong. But when we do it, it's good and it's for your kids and, you know, we're saving America. All right, I think we basically summed up that video there. I can't imagine anything else interesting is going to be said, unless y'all really, really want to keep watching that. But yeah, for the record, I don't actually think that George Orwell should be censored, right? I'm in favor of, for the most part, freedom of information, especially between working class people, the working masses. For the most part, of course, I don't think there should be like pornography in schools and things like that. But, you know, if socialism and Marxism-Leninism weren't systematically censored, weren't systematically dismantled from the Western education system, the Western media, and not only, you know, stripped from those systems, but anti-communist, anti-Marxist education is injected into those systems by the ruling capitalist class and by the government. I believe if that didn't happen and we got to read capitalist ideology versus socialist ideology, capitalist history versus socialist history, everyone would turn to socialism, except for the ultra wealthy, except for those, the ruling capitalist class and their descendants. But the truth is on our side. As Che Guevara says, it's not my fault that reality is Marxist. So, you know, Marxism helps us interpret reality and the Marxist method of history is correct, you know, and that was not stripped out of our education system. I think people would go towards the Marxist method of history anyways. But it's systematically ripped out of our system. So that's, you know, why one of our most important tasks as socialists is to educate people about Marxism and educate people about the truth. But it's so ridiculous that these people like Ben Shapiro claim to be warriors of free speech, which, first of all, Ben, where were you when 30,000 TikTok accounts got removed for being Russian bots, including 7 of our accounts, which obviously aren't run by Russian bots? You'll never speak up for the left when they get censored. But he's not talking about the years of McCarthyism and Red Scare propaganda and anti-communist control of not just the news media, but like Hollywood and the entertainment media. Like today, if you're going to use military gear in a movie, the Pentagon gets huge control over the script of your movie and what the movie's about and how they portray the military. Right? We have the military and finance capital in direct control of Hollywood. But these guys only want to talk about censorship when it's related to the Democrats and AOC and when they can get 1 million views on YouTube talking about it. They don't actually care. Freaking propagandists. I recommend for anyone to read a brief biographical sketch and the three sources and component parts of Marxism, both by Lenin. Yeah, it sounds interesting. I never read it, but they are short and concise, introduce you both to the Marxism and arguably the most effective Marxist in history so far. Yes, that is arguable, but I think Lenin was the most effective Marxist in history so far. I mean, that's a tough debate because you have, I mean, Mao is probably second, if I had to guess, or if I had to rank them. Mao is probably second. Ho Chi Minh is up there. Che Guevara. Che Guevara also tried to do revolution in the Congo and Bolivia, which failed, but he's like the only one to try multiple revolutions even. But yeah, Lenin was just so, his grasp on Marxism was so unheard of at the time and so good, and his will was so iron and so strong, which was partially because the government, the Tsarist monarchy, murdered his brother, which is something you never hear from the Marx or the Western propagandists, the anti-Marxist propagandists. They always say Lenin was this evil dictator, or maybe, you know, Lenin wasn't a dictator, but he brought Stalin to power, turned Russia into this horrible Soviet totalitarian communist dictatorship where the government kills people. Well, what about his brother, who was killed by the pre-Soviet government, by the Tsarist monarchy? It sounds like that government was killing people indiscriminately and throwing people in torture chambers and sending Russian working class people and Russian soldiers to fight and die in these senseless wars for accumulation and expansion. Which is exactly what the Tsarist monarchy was, which is exactly what pre-revolutionary Russia was. It was one of the most dictatorial, top-down, exploitative societies you could possibly imagine. And after that, the Soviet Union built themselves into this world superpower that taught everyone to read and stuff. And, you know, you start to realize that it wasn't the failure that we've been told it was, which is exactly why they don't tell you about Lenin's brother. But I think that's what gave him that iron will. Orwell, the piece of poop. Absolutely. It's so ironic when Americans talk about the government that kills people. I know. It's like, how can you guys still make this argument? You know how many people have been victimized by American capitalism. So many more than socialism. So many more. Like, it's not even close. If you want to do death count economics, socialism wins by a lot. Death count economics. That's what Richard Wolff calls it. Soviet Union sent the first man to space. Absolutely. And then the U.S. had to fake the moon landing to one-up them. Just kidding. I've never actually looked into that. I've always wanted to look into it because it makes sense, right? Like the justification to do that is there. Sort of like the JFK assassination, or like if you know about the history of that event, you're like, yeah, the CIA definitely had incentive to get rid of him at that point. Which it's like the Soviet Union sent the first man to space, so the U.S. definitely wanted to be the first one to land on the moon, is to win the Cold War and the space race. So the incentive to fake it was there for sure, which is why I want to look into it. But Christopher Facts, I love that he said anti-Stalinists suffer from mental disorder. I'm lost in that conversation. The USSR admitted it was not fake, I think. Well, that kind of settles it. Kind of. Eddie said that with such a straight face. I know. I'm good at that. I'm good at joking with, like, I'll just say the joke as serious as possible, and I start laughing. It was totally fake, LOL, no question. Well, now we're going to have a whole moon landing deep dive episode. And that will be when our YouTube channel gets banned for spreading conspiracies. Where's Jack? I believe you, but I'd like to see the number. Stanley Kubrick was hired to fake the moon landing, but he was such a perfectionist, he insisted on doing it on site. That's funny. That's a good joke. The artifacts on the surface of the moon can be verified to be there with ground-based telescopes on Earth. Yeah, telescopes that were invented by the government, by NASA, to pretend that things are on the moon. I'm just kidding. The conspiracy I really don't get is flat Earth. I know a Marxist Leninist guy who recently just totally went off the deep end and went towards conspiracies and flat Earth. Like, who would that conspiracy theory even benefit? The flat Earth theory, like the people who make maps, because they're trying to infringe and compete with the globe industry. Like, who's making money from the flat Earth? Or who's making money from having people believe the Earth is round? Sam Dixon, hey, any chance you could do a quick read through of Lenin's 3 sources and 3 component parts? It'd be a good brief segment for the show. Solidarity, mate. Definitely, Sam. Can definitely do that at some point. I have it written down to read it. I will definitely read it and do a summary or do some kind of reaction to it. Oh, this is short. Here it is. The 3 sources and 3 component parts of Marxism. Oh, this looks awesome. Yeah, everyone read this if you want to get started with theory. It looks pretty short. It's from Lenin, so I'm sure it's fantastic, even though I haven't gotten a chance to read it. But we can definitely talk about this next stream after I get a chance to read through it. Yeah, thank you, Sam Dixon. Thank you for the super chat also, and for being a YouTube member. Right now, I have to run to the bathroom really bad, which makes me sad because we have so many followers in here right now. So I'm going to hurry and come back as soon as I can. Please don't leave. 113 stream viewers. We're happy to have you here. Like, comment, and share the stream with your friends, with your grandma, with whoever you want, whoever you know. Help us defeat the YouTube algorithm and defeat the capitalists. Here's a video of me wrestling while I go to the bathroom. Oh no, why does it always lag out like this? Hopefully it wasn't lagging the whole time. That's so annoying. I hate that it does that. I almost got pinned by this guy. I got put on my back. See, look, not good. And then I scored like 15 unanswered points on him because he wasn't that good. I mean, he was okay. I think he's a coach now, actually. We are back. I'd pay to attend an event where Eddie first debated his opponent and then wrestled them. I would be so down for that. I'm always trying to get in on those like celebrity boxing matches and stuff. They're all just scared of me. But there's like whole leagues of boxing now, like just for TikTokers. Like I want to get in on that. I'm like the only TikToker who actually trains in combat sports. Like, what's the deal? Why am I not getting invited? If our original TikTok account didn't get banned, we would have 1 million followers right now, and I would be fighting Bryce Hall. Are there any other leftists in wrestling? Most leftists or most wrestlers I've ever met in the U.S. are reactionaries. BJJ is even worse. Oh, thank you, J Flow Grappling Academy. Cool to meet another grappling socialist or leftist. There are some. I've told this story a lot. This year, every single tournament I went to, every single wrestling tournament, somebody came up to me and said, "Are you Midwestern Marx? I love your content. I love your streams or your TikToks or whatever. You got me into socialism." So that, like, I've noticed a lot of left wrestlers are open to it, right? And I've told this story a lot too. When I was in college, I got the majority of our wrestling team, who was the second or first ranked team in the country, the first ranked team in the country that year. About half of them caucused for Bernie Sanders. They came and voted in the primary, and it was kind of a big process caucusing in Iowa. It's the caucus is what Iowa calls their primary voting process. So where you vote for the Democratic nominee. And it was just hitting class-based issues, right? A bunch of them were military guys who joined the military for free college, talked about how Bernie didn't want to send them into any disastrous wars, give them free college, free healthcare, stuff like that. A lot of them were just like working class guys, right? And I explained how corrupt the political system is, how corrupt the healthcare system is, how common sense policies like Medicare for all are, how they would change people's lives and make them better and make your, insurance premium go away. Explain stuff like that and got about half of them to vote. So, I mean, there's a lot of reactionary wrestlers. It's sort of the default position to just be a Trump supporter, but there's so many of them that are working class. It's definitely a working class sport. And they're open to socialism, right? Same with BJJ people, I think. And MMA is, sort of reactionary, but that they just don't like liberals, right? They just don't like liberalism. And it was hard with Bernie because Bernie's basically a freaking lib. And he kept drifting away from class-based issues and more towards freaking lib issues because he's a cuck to the Democratic establishment. Fuck you, Bernie. Sorry, I get so mad thinking about the campaign again. But by focusing on class-based issues, I was able to bring a lot of wrestlers out to caucus, bring a lot of them to socialism. I was once a judo instructor. They were all fascists. That's too bad. Very cool that you were a judo instructor, though, Ross. Thank you very much for the $2 super chat. I've done a little tiny bit of judo, mostly just like judo throws, like the Uchimata. Is that the name of it? But yeah, thank you very much for the super chat. Dang it, late again. It's all right, Pashiko. We upload everything as a clip. You'll be able to watch eventually. Me too. I did judo my whole life. Look at this. See? Look at all these grapplers who are socialists that we have in the stream right now, in the chat right now. This just proves that grappling is no longer a reactionary thing. Grappling is now a socialist activity. Speaking of which, actually, this is a perfect transition into one of the videos I had for today. So because I'm into fitness and grappling, first of all, I get Joe Rogan recommended to me all the time, but I also get all these like weird motivational videos. Some of them are good. Some of them are cool. It's like, you got to work up, or you got to wake up and work hard. And, you got to work hard for anything you want. Anything that's worthwhile, you should want. Or anything that's worthwhile takes hard work, delayed gratification, blah, blah, blah. And then I watch a bunch of videos about like doing ice baths and how to control your sleep and, get enough sun and do stuff that's good for your body, athlete fitness stuff. So I get all these weird motivational videos. Some of them are absurd, right? Some of them are like, I saw this one guy the other day who was like, from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m., that's my first day. Then from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., that's my second day. And then from 8 p.m. to midnight, that's my third day. So I have manipulated time. And now I have 3 days and one within every day. And I'm going to kick your ass because I have more days. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, I could just say, every hour I start a new day. And so every day I actually have 24 days, 24 more than you. How are you going to beat me? You're not. Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I ran across a video the other day that was somewhere in between goofy and motivational and cool. It's this guy talking about putting your kids in jujitsu, putting your kids in wrestling and in combat sports when they're young to teach them confidence and discipline and things like that. And I've always said I wish, as a part of every physical education class in the US, kids would have to do some kind of martial art, right, to teach them discipline and confidence and how to take care of themselves and, fun way to do fitness, and how to compete and conflict resolution. There's so many lessons that I learned from wrestling my whole life that I wouldn't have had without that. And I just wish everyone had access to that. It's like Mao Zedong's a study of physical education is one of my favorite Marxist texts ever, where he talks about the necessity of having a strong body and how that leads to a strong mind. But of course, the ruling class who crafts our education system, they don't necessarily want a strong, confident working class that's willing to stand up for themselves and has respect for each other. They do not want that, which is why kids are forced to sit in their desk all day and they don't have recess starting in like 6th grade. They take recess away and you got to be inside all day. They're just training you up for that desk job or that office job or wherever you're going to work the rest of your life. But let's watch this video because I did think it was kind of interesting. Oh, come on. It's all blocked. Here, maybe if I turn my ad blocker off. Just this page.
See, every single boy.
Why does it do this? Oh, well, you can hear him. It's just some big jacked guy with like a flat bill hat.
He still has aggression in him, still has this desire to be rough and tumble. But when they haven't been given the opportunity to be rough and tumble with the dad because dad has been declawed and defanged, and now this young boy has been declawed and defanged, it shows up as passive aggressiveness. What would happen if you took your boy at a young age and put him into jujitsu? You put him into some active sports where there was combat, there was conflict. You would now have a young boy who's more confident and capable. You would now have a boy who has tested himself against others in his age group and knows his capabilities and capacities. You would have a boy who knows how to give feedback in a scenario where there's conflict. But when that boy has not experienced any of those things, he grows up to be a man-child who is passive-aggressive, a nice guy, backstabbing, unable to communicate his thoughts, emotions, and feelings, and soon gets put in this category of, oh, he's a nice guy, but I wouldn't date him or marry him. See,
so that's a pretty good explanation of the lessons that you learn when you're a kid, when you get to do wrestling or jujitsu or some kind of combat sport. You see where you're at versus your peers in terms of skill level, and there's no lying to yourself, right? You can't just tell yourself that you're better because, if you're not better, you're going to lose. You're going to lose the match because you can't lie in athletics or wrestling. It just is what it is. You win or you lose. They're better or you're better for those 7 minutes or 6 minutes in high school. But I mean, the thing I don't like about this is it's clearly from that like red pill, this is how you get girls mentality. Like girls don't want to be with you because you're weak and your dad was defanged and declawed and he was a beta. So you're a beta and you're going to lose all these girls to the alpha. It sounds like that, which is not why you should do martial arts, right? I mean, having confidence and being able to stand up for yourself is going to help you, when talking to potential partners or with dating, of course. I mean, that's one of the things, but that's not the main reason you do it. right? The reason you do it, or the reason that it would be good for kids to do it in the school system, or however else, is having all of our kids do some kind of martial art, is it would teach them self-respect, respect for other people. It would teach them humility, right? You wouldn't be able to lie to yourself and tell yourself you're the best, because you're eventually going to get beat up by somebody, and you're going to learn that other people are tough too. It's going to teach you toughness. It'll teach you discipline. It'll teach you the value of developing yourself, the value of delayed gratification, right? You work hard now and for reward later. It would help with happiness and depression, right? It would help with social isolation. That's one of the things that I've noticed wrestling does for kids in high school who maybe aren't super comfortable socially, don't have a ton of friends, or don't have an easy time making friends. They come out for wrestling, and you spend time working towards a common goal with these other people, and beating each other up every day to help make each other better, which is another concept that's worth learning. Iron sharpens iron, and it gives these kids a social group. It gives them a sense of purpose. It gives them a sense of belonging, and not just a social group, but a social group where I have a role. Right? Even if I'm on junior varsity, I have to make the varsity guy better. I have to come in and work hard every day and do my job, do my role for this collective to work, for our best guys to succeed. And I've always talked about how socialistic wrestling is in that way too, where it's less of a rigid hierarchy. I mean, there are hierarchies, but at least at the high school and college level, it's definitely a team sport where you make each other better. And rising in the hierarchy of wrestling is more based on your hard work and what you actually do, not on exploiting people the same way, or the way that you rise in the capitalist hierarchy. But yeah, teach MMA in all schools. Not MMA, but I'm not saying have kids fight in a cage, but I mean, wrestling is literally, and jiu-jitsu is great too, but wrestling is literally grappling, fighting with any move that can submit or break someone's arm or choke them unconscious or bloody them, taken out, right? So you can't do an arm bar. You can't do joint manipulation. You can't rip their arm off or their leg off. You can't punch them in the face. You can't choke them, right? But you have to control them without submission moves, without moves that would, potentially lead to death or serious injury. So it's great in that way for allowing people to get their anger out, get their energy out, and engage in conflict in a way that's not going to lead to death. They're not going to lead to huge injuries, which even like Muay Thai, it's a beautiful sport. And I love doing the striking sometimes, but even when you're sparring, I can tell, like, I get hit in the head. And if you have a hard sparring day, the next day, you might have a little bit of a headache. It's like, okay, I can't do this forever, right? I can't do this. And you can't wrestle forever either. But you're risking way less head trauma when you wrestle. Although I had a friend once, not a friend of a friend, who was wrestling, and his testicle got pinched in between someone's knee and the mat, and it burst. I can hardly even tell that story. It makes me want to throw up. I feel so bad for that kid. He still has one ball to this day. And he wrestled the next year too. He kept going with it. I've wrestled my whole life, for years. It was like the main core of my identity and who I saw myself as. And I think I would quit wrestling if my testicle burst. I just would be done. It's not 6 minutes. It's what happens in those 6 minutes. Vision Quest. Yeah, baby. Lunatic Fringe. I'm giving you a round of applause for that one. Shout out to Loud and Swain, who dropped weight classes to defeat the Shoot. For those who don't know, Vision Quest is one of the only wrestling movies ever made, and it's freaking hilarious, dude. It's like an old school 70s or 80s movie, or a pretty typical movie from the 80s. It's like a period piece almost, like it transports you to the 80s or 70s whenever it was made. And the main song is this Lunatic Fringe song. Lunatic Fringe. Yeah, they only do one move. They only do the lat drop that whole movie. My favorite part of the movie is when they announce over the loudspeaker that the main character, Loudon Swain, is going to be going down a weight class so he can wrestle the main villain named Shoot. And they announce it at school over the announcements, which there are schools who won't even announce over the announcements when they have wrestlers who win state. Right? There are schools who are so disrespectful to their wrestling programs. They'll have like a kid win a state title and they won't even talk about it over the announcements. That's especially down south. Wrestling gets more respect in the Midwest. But even in the Midwest, no school would ever announce, like if I decided to drop a weight class and wrestle some guy, there was a 0% chance that my school would ever talk about that over the announcements. Like Eddie is going down a weight class and he's going to be wrestling Steve Johnson this week. I don't know. For me as a wrestler, I thought that part was really funny. You might be mad at people who laugh at that story. Just don't be testy about it. That was a good one, Reclaimed. Never heard those announcements in high school. When I was in high school, sorry, yeah, we don't wear any cups in wrestling, no. When I was in high school, wrestling, or if you qualified for state, you would do like a march. You would march around the school and everyone would come out of their class. It was like a parade and they would like clap for you. And, me and the other wrestlers who made it to state would walk around the school and see your friends. It was a nice moment. But we got like wrestling season was during the same time as forensics or like the debate team. So we had like me and these 4 or 5 other wrestlers who qualified for state, typical like wrestlers. We were in high school, but still like muscular, cauliflower ear. We were probably scowling because we were cutting weight. And then you had the kids who qualified for the forensics team, for the debate team, who were scrawny and definitely looked like they were on the debate team, but it was pretty fun. There were some really nice kids on the debate team who I made friends with. And it was fun to do that parade with them just because of the contradiction between having wrestlers and debate team do the same parade for the same thing. It was just funny. A lot of sports movies in the 80s too. Yeah, a lot of great ones. A lot of propaganda in the 80s though, for sure. Yeah, Dr. Anthony Montero basically ruined the Rocky movies for me. Rocky was... I have a Rocky 4 poster in my room right now with Ivan Drago's boxing glove with a communist hammer and sickle on it. I loved Rocky, but then Anthony Montero told me like all these black fighters like Muhammad Ali were winning the championships in boxing, and Muhammad Ali was obviously anti-Vietnam War, huge social activist, anti-war, basically a socialist activist while he was boxing, changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali. So the Rocky movies were like a counter to that. They were a counter where like you have this great white hope, this white boxer from the mean streets of Philadelphia who comes up and he beats Apollo Creed, this black boxer who's dominating everybody and is brash like Muhammad Ali. So he's like, it's basically a fake movie created at the time to, say that white people can beat the black boxers. I'm like, no, why do you have to ruin Rocky for me? But Apollo Creed also wins the first fight. He wins in Rocky 1, and then Rocky comes back and wins in Rocky 2. So I don't know. Maybe it's not racist. I'm just trying to hang on to anything I got to let me keep enjoying Rocky. Gentleman of Fortune is probably a nice entree to Soviet cinema. Entry or entree? I've always wanted to get into Soviet cinema. I know they made some amazing movies. I just rewatched Rocky 4 and laughed at the portrayal of the Soviet Union. Yeah, I believe either Rocky 3 or 4 was the first one that Sylvester Stallone directed and maybe wrote. So Rocky 1 and 2, they had like, talented directors and Sylvester Stallone was just playing Rocky. But then he took it over, and then you get Rocky 3 where he fights Mr. T, Clubber Lang, and then Rocky 4, which is just like a comic book movie made straight just as a parody of the Cold War. There's a fake ESPN 30 for 30 about Rocky 4. We've watched it before on stream, where Rocky beats Ivan Drago, and that's what ends the Cold War. And the Soviet politicians are like, we're no longer going to do communism because Rocky won. It's pretty freaking funny. Uncle Paulie. Yes. So what do y'all think? Wrestling in all schools? Mixed martial arts in every school? Are you with me on that? Am I crazy? I might be crazy. Let's watch. Which one do I want to watch next? Let's watch this next. This is another, we got another Joe Rogan clip today. This is David Cho. I'm not sure what David Cho's background is, actually. I don't know much about him. I guess I should have looked that up, but he went on the Joe Rogan Experience. He had a famous clip where he started crying when talking about Anthony Bourdain that went viral during this podcast or another one with Joe Rogan. But this is him talking about going and living with the Hadza people of Tanzania, this tribe of sorts that lives through hunting and lives in a really, sort of primitive fashion. And it's listening to him describe it is incredible because it's very similar to what Marx and Engels talk about with primitive communism in these primitive communist societies where they study the Iroquois and the development of the American Iroquois societies and look at all these different, more primitive or indigenous societies and how they've developed over time. And they find that originally they lived in these primitive communist societies with no class division, right? The society produced and distributed goods based on what was best for everybody. Ultimately socialism or communism is returning to this classless society, getting rid of the class division and exploitation while still having, the productive forces that we have, while still having the technology and productive capacities that we have. But they realize there are all these differences in how these primitive communist societies live and how they interact with one another based on how they produce, because the way they produce their goods and services, or their goods, their means of subsistence, the food and shelter that they need to survive, is different than the way that we do it in the Western world or the capitalist world, which leads to all sorts of differences in their culture, all sorts of differences in their language and how they communicate and stuff, which is, the theory of Marxism, that the productive base conditions the superstructure, which conditions the base. But for those who have followed along with our Origins of the Family, Private Property, and the State reading guide, right here, or for those of you who have read this book, which is where Engels talks about anthropology and prehistory and these primitive communist societies and their development and how they transitioned into class societies with more accumulation. This video will be really interesting, which last thing I want to talk about before we play the video. The theory then that these societies transitioned out of primitive communism once they could produce enough to hoard, right? Once they could produce enough to accumulate and store goods and hoard more goods than what they needed to survive. Then you have people who start to seize those goods, collect those goods, take those goods as their own private property, which eventually leads to people seizing land itself as private property, saying this is my land. And which leads to then slave ownership, which leads to forcing the slaves to labor on the land, which leads to more accumulation. And as wealth accumulates in the hands of one class, society itself becomes divided into classes. It becomes cleaved into a class of those who own but don't work, and a class of those who work but don't own. But this Hadza society has pretty much isolated themselves from the capitalist world, and they still live in this sort of primitive communist fashion.
And they're telling the translator, this motherfucker looks like he's never caught anything in his life. And he's like, he hasn't. And to me, I'm an alien, right? They go, he gets his food from supermarkets. What's that? They hunt the food for him. They cut it up and package it and sell it. Like, they don't believe it.
Right.
The shit I tell them, they're like, hey, you guys, you look like a fucking supermodel. Can I bring you to America and do a fashion thing and get you guys paid? And why would we want to go to America? Well, tell me what you know about America. Isn't that the place where people jump off buildings to kill themselves? Like, that concept is so foreign that when someone explained suicide to them, I was like, oh my God, they don't. And in the time that I'm there, like I said, that first week is withdrawal. I'm like, fuck, where's my phone? And then all of it goes away, right? I'm not thinking about any of my addictions. I'm not thinking about, like, I feel peace. I'm not miserable. My depression goes away. And I go, morning till night, you wake up, you hunt for food, you get home, celebration, everyone's happy that the men brought the food back, the women, gathered the berries. We have a big dinner celebration because every meal you got to be grateful for. Dance party by the fire, and you're out. A couple fart jokes and you're out. Repeat the next day. There's no time to be like bored and sad and upset and worried about some bullshit. And so I'm trying to keep up with these guys. They're running at top speed. Like, say this is say these are the baboons on top of they're doing a perimeter. Okay, we're gonna come up all the sides, and the dogs are on the forefront, right? They're running faster. There's a guy named Ale Aleane. He's got some dreads. He's the village, the tribe pothead. He's got the Bible. He's rolling joints for everyone. He's about 50 feet behind.
So this is an interesting story too, but you hear him say there, all his addictions went away. His depression went away because all they were doing was hunting. And you don't have anybody else in the tribe who's trying to screw you over. Anyone else in the tribe who's trying to exploit you. Anyone who's trying to make $1 while you make a dime. Everybody in the tribe has the same goal as you. It's sort of like what I was talking about with the wrestling team giving people community. It's everybody in the tribe is trying to hunt and survive and feed you and feed them and feed your friends. So there's this connection that these, so-called primitive communist societies have, because their society isn't cleaved into classes. It's not divided into classes of those who own and those who work. The division of labor is based on what you can do, right? The men go and hunt. The women have domestic jobs and get gather berries and things like that. The kids and the grandparents help with cleaning and cooking and things like that. The division of labor is based on your role within the family unit, your role within the society. Our division of labor is based on whatever will maximize profit for a capitalist, right? If they can line us all up in an assembly line like a human farm 12 hours a day, or in tiny little cubicle office buildings and just extract work from us, have us do the same monotonous task all day, because that's what leads to more profits. That's what they're going to do. They don't care if it leads to depression. They don't care if it leads to alienation. They're just trying to maximize profit. That's how production is organized. But it doesn't have to be organized like that. Production has been organized in many different ways before throughout history. Production has been organized like the Hadza tribe, where they all work together to produce what they need. And there's no class division in society. And guess what? They're not depressed. They're not addicted to drugs. They don't have all of these things like suicide that are plaguing the US and getting worse and worse and worse every year because of the isolation and disconnection and alienation built into the core of our society, into our mode of production itself. So, we can have technology and we can have all these productive capacities, all these wonderful things like medical technology that have come from technological and productive advancements and from engineering. But we got to get rid of the class-based exploitation, right? We have to move towards common ownership of the means of production, because there are thousands of people committing suicide every year. There are hundreds of thousands of people dying from opioid addiction every year. Our society is isolated from each other, disconnected from each other. They only see other people as individuals who they're competing with. They don't see individuals as their fellow human, as a brother or sister, the way that a primitive communist society like the Hadza people of Tanzania see it. It's just incredible because you think these people have so little technology compared to us. They have so little consumerism and so few material goods. The material goods are things that they've created themselves or with their friends and family. But they're so much happier than we are in America, where we're just surrounded by crap, where we just have commodities circulating around us. We're literally in a whirlwind of commodities that we're being beat over the head with constantly. Buy this, buy that. Buy this so you can be attractive. Buy that so you can be smart. Buy this so you can look good. Buy this so women will love you. And it doesn't lead to happiness. It leads to depression. It leads to people feeling like they're not enough. It leads to alienation, both social isolation and alienation from the products of our labor. It's not a good way to organize society. Capitalism sucks. And, people talk about capitalism's the best we can do. There can never be a better system. There's literally a better system in Tanzania where they don't even have technology and they're still 20 times happier than us. What do you mean we can't move towards a better system? Why don't we try and replicate their system that makes them so happy, where they don't have class on class exploitation with all the technology that we have? Oh no, that would be Marxism and socialism. It'd make too much sense. We can't do it. I know that my struggles with substances is ultimately on me, but I often wonder if I would have gravitated towards alcohol if I grew up in a society that valued the collective over the individual. Absolutely. I mean, I've struggled with things like that myself. And I always have those same thoughts. Like, I wouldn't be doing this, even like my energy drink addiction, right? And I like to do drink energy drinks and then stream or write articles or whatever. But I always wonder, like, if I didn't have to wake up and, motivate myself to make a certain amount of money that day, or accomplish a certain amount of things that day in order to survive. If I didn't have the competitive market motivations of capitalism, would I feel like I need to drink an energy drink every day? Right? Would I need to hype myself up so I can work super hard for a few hours? Probably not. Or, would I have, I don't drink that much anymore, but there was a time in my life where I was like blacking out twice every week. And, I don't know that I would have gotten to that spot without capitalist motivations, market motivations influencing me. At the time that developed, I'm thinking about it now, I was working concrete like 10, 12 hours a day. And everyone I worked with was an alcoholic. That was, basically they got there at 6 a.m. and then they would leave at 6 to 8 p.m. every day and then wake up and do the same thing 5 to 6 hours a week. And pretty much everyone at that concrete company I worked at was someone who had been convicted of a felony or someone who was an immigrant, maybe an illegal immigrant, and didn't have citizenship. So they had a hard time finding good paying work anywhere else. And that was that company. And they all relied on alcohol and they all fell back on drugs because their life was so freaking hard. Right? Their life was so hard. And you're just going to be thinking, I got to wake up and do the same thing tomorrow. Unless you just pour some alcohol on it. Then you'll be like, oh, whatever. It takes your worries away for a little bit. And we talked with Ramiro too about how in poor neighborhoods, low income neighborhoods, there aren't very many grocery stores, right? Oftentimes these places are food deserts where the only food that you have is fast food. And then one of the only, sources of commerce that you have is a liquor store, right? There's a liquor store in every low income neighborhood, but there's not a grocery store. So a lot of people's only option for entertainment or for numbing the pain of life is to just go get liquor, drink poison to make your worries go away. So this society definitely pushes people towards addiction and depression. And if we had a society that valued the collective over the individual, I guarantee you addiction would go zoop. Not to mention, and if y'all want to learn more about this, read the Journal of American Socialist Studies too. This is what my article focuses on. But the pharmaceutical industry purposefully dosed everyone with opioids. They spent millions of dollars pushing opioids on providers, pushing them on people, downplaying the risks of addiction and death. And now we have over 100,000 people who die every year from fentanyl and heroin and drugs that they get on after they started with pharmaceutical opioids. So not only does our individualistic system cause people to be alienated and fall back on addiction to numb the pain that they feel every day, but the capitalists are trying to beat us over the head with those addictions, right? They're trying to beat us over the head with opioids. And in every place where the U.S. outsourced a bunch of jobs, or Western companies outsourced a bunch of jobs after NAFTA, the free trade deal signed into law by Bill Clinton that Vaush said was a good idea the other day, a bunch of people's jobs were outsourced and opioids flooded in. So the jobs flood out, the opioids flood in, people are getting unemployed, and then they're suffering anxiety, and the doctors are telling them that they should treat their anxiety with opioids because that's what they've been told to do by the pharmaceutical companies who are controlling the medical colleges and media apparatuses and things like that. Sorry, this is what you need to read if you want to learn about this. Sorry. This is Carlos's new book. But addiction started shooting up because, yeah, people's jobs are leaving, their source of income, their source of feeding their family, their anxiety goes up. And then a doctor who that working class person doesn't know is being controlled by the pharmaceutical industry tells them to take an opioid. So jobs have been replaced with addiction during the parasitism and decay of American capitalism. It's about one of the saddest things you could ever think of or you could ever watch. And it's really sad to go through these deindustrialized towns like Gary, Indiana, where crime and drugs have replaced manufacturing. And then you have people like Vaush, the great socialist Vaush, who makes all his money streaming on Twitch and probably getting paid by the CIA and the NED, who's like, NAFTA was a great idea. NAFTA was a good idea. NAFTA was just implemented wrong. You are a moron. You are calling yourself a socialist while advocating for working class people's jobs to be outsourced and replaced with opioid medications. So yeah, that was the Hadza tribe. Shout out to David Cho. He's an artist, I guess. I looked it up while we were watching that video. I wonder what kind of art he does. Lol, don't blame the CIA or NED for his idiocy. That's just the only way I could see anyone being that dumb. Like, there's no way you're that dumb or like callous or egotistical and arrogant. It's gotta be that he's a State Department psyop. Just kidding. He's probably just that arrogant and dumb. I was a heroin user for 10 years before I got my job at UPS. It started when I was prescribed an unnecessary shitload of Vicodin after getting my wisdom teeth removed. Wow. Wow, that's interesting because I still got to get my wisdom teeth removed. And that's a surgery that like everyone goes through, right? Everyone gets their wisdom teeth out. And they dosed you with Vicodin and got you addicted to heroin for 10 years. That is an insane, insane story that could happen to anyone. And that's the thing, you know, I had someone in my family who this happened to, a similar story. They had a surgery, got prescribed Vicodin and got hooked. And eventually we caught them and had an intervention. And, you know, that person's been sober forever now. But like watching that scared the crap out of me because that person is someone who's active in their church community, has a stable job, one of the best like moms I've ever known, you know, super good family member, loving, incredible human being who this happened to because of the healthcare system, because of the pharmaceutical industry. And then it showed me like I dislocated my elbow really bad once and got prescribed Vicodin. I took one of them. Right, I took one and I would wake up every night just in severe pain, like in such pain because I would take ibuprofen and it would wear off in the middle of the night. And then I would stumble to the kitchen and, you know, get another ibuprofen and wait for it to kick in and for the pain to go away a little bit. But I would rather deal with that than risk taking Vicodin given to me by the doctors that's going to lead to a heroin addiction. And you know, who knows? Maybe I would have gotten hooked if I didn't watch my family member go through that. But it can happen to anyone. It can happen to anyone. And what do we think of when we see homeless people or when we see drug addicts? You know, oh, that's a different person than me, right? That's somebody who went the wrong direction in life. That's someone who made bad choices. That's someone who put themselves there and didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Or maybe it was someone who had a stable job, who had a family, who had an income, who had a home, who had a life, and, you know, eventually tore their Achilles or had some injury where they had to get surgery, were prescribed Oxycontin or prescribed Vicodin, and that spiraled into a heroin addiction until that spiraled into them losing everything and becoming homeless. Like, if you watch this YouTube channel, it's called Invisible People, I believe. They just interview homeless people and ask them how they got there. And that's the story of like almost all of them. They're almost all like, yeah, I had to get surgery and got hooked on opioids. And eventually, you know, that led to heroin. Almost all of them are people who had families, who had jobs, who were, you know, doing what you're supposed to do. But then something happened in their lives that set them on the wrong path, usually, you know, something that's not even in their control, like them taking the medicine they were prescribed by a literal doctor, and that leading into a horrible addiction and losing everything. And then we've been covering this too. There's like people who try and do public housing, set up public housing for these people. Like these folks called Cob on Wood, they build these little houses and these little communities for people on land that's not being used. And they are constantly getting kicked off by the city. And the city is demolishing these because it is bad for landlords. It's bad for people that are trying to monopolize that land and charge folks for housing. Charge huge sums of money just to have shelter, you know, and push anybody who can't pay rent every month into homelessness, into the streets. That's what the government and the landlord class actively enforces, right? Humans have tried to come together and house each other, right? That's when the government comes in and pushes you off. The police show up, these pigs show up with guns, and of course they're allowed to shoot you because the government has a monopoly on violence. So these police show up with guns and they force these people off the land and force homeless people back into the streets rather than these tiny little homes that aren't bothering freaking anybody. So this is our system. This is our system. We always say socialism's a system by and for the people, a society for itself, and capitalism is a society for capital. I mean, what a better example than this? You got people sleeping in these houses and the government's going to come out and kick them out with guns, force them onto the streets because some, you know, coalition of landlords wanted it so they can charge people more for rent. Literally throwing human beings into the street to protect the interests of capital. This is why we have a sick society. The capitalist relations of production force the ruling capitalist class to be the most horrific, evil people and do the most evil things. Oftentimes, they're not even enforcing it, right? The capitalists don't show up and kick these people off their land. That would make them look bad. And then they'd actually have to get their hands dirty. No, they send the police to do it. The armed body of the state that serves as a tool of suppression by the ruling class of the working masses. Now the Sacklers are making money off of buprenorphine, the medication we have to use to get off opiates. Of course they are. And thank you so much for the super chat, Matthew Smith, and solidarity with you and your, you know, road to recovery and stuff like that. Hope it goes well for you. But this is one of the other focuses in the Journal of American Socialist Studies, that write-up of the opioid crisis that I did. Not only have these for-profit companies monopolized the pharmaceutical industry and gotten people addicted to opioids, but they also control the recovery centers. They control the rehab centers, the addiction centers, who are price gouging people, who are profit-based, right? And a lot of them end up just being like luxury rehab centers for rich people that are essentially like a spa. But there's a huge cost barrier to addiction treatment, to rehab. And, you know, what person who starts with opioids and eventually gets addicted to heroin because they lost all their money buying opioids, how many of those people can afford addiction treatment? Very, 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 very few. Right? So these need to be public. They can't be for profit. But not only are they for profit, not only is there a cost barrier to addiction treatment, but the Sacklers, the people who were the main drivers of the opioid crisis in the first place, are profiting off it. They are profiting off the treatment of the addiction that they caused. So they're making money on both ends, and it's the most sick thing you could ever imagine. And we need to seize our healthcare system from these people. The whole thing. They don't get anything. Right? People are like, oh, they worked hard for capitalists, work hard for that money. You're just going to seize it from them. They didn't work hard for shit. The only thing the Sackler family worked hard to do is poison a bunch of Americans and kill a bunch of Americans with fentanyl. And guess what? That means you don't get to be in charge of the healthcare system anymore, guys. We're seizing it from you. Oh, we worked hard for this. Don't care. Do not care. You got my family member addicted to opioids. Fuck off. We're taking it and we're turning it into a healthcare system that actually works. Go cry about it. That's what the left needs to start telling these capitalists and these capitalist ideologues like Ben Shapiro, who cry and throw a hissy fit every time we say we're going to seize the means of production. Well, you can't do that. Private property. We worked hard for that. Shut up. Shut up. Yes, we can do that. We're more than you, right? We are the masses. You are a handful of people who only has power because we recognize your capital and because we go into work for you every day. You got all of us addicted to opioids. Shut the hell up. We're taking it. We're taking the economy back, Wall Street and bankers. You can't poison people and exploit them and throw them onto the streets and destroy their homes and charge them 75% of their paychecks for rent without eventually those people getting pissed off, coming together and overthrowing you and seizing your wealth. Go cry about it. Oh, this is unethical. It is unethical for you to get us all addicted to opioids. Piss off. The left needs to be stronger. We need to quit begging for Medicare for all. We need to quit begging that, please, please give us health care. Please nationalize the insurance industry. These insurance companies are really bad. No, the whole system's bad. The whole system's bad. Don't beg them for Medicare for all. They're never going to give you shit. They're profit-hungry vultures who got people addicted to fentanyl because it made them more money. Don't ask them for anything. Take it. Organize and take it. Demand it. Guess what? We're not just taking the insurance industry, guys. You should have given us Medicare for all when you had the chance. We're taking the whole freaking healthcare system, we're nationalizing it, and we're making a system that actually works. It's actually by, for, and of the people. I want to write a Vision Quest remake starring Eddie Liger, where Shoot is the evil capitalist who owns the town, and Loudon is a worker/rebel leader. Loudon wins the town and seizes the means of production. I love it. Yes, this would be a wonderful movie. Thank you. And the Shoot, the evil capitalist, can be a pharmaceutical capitalist. He can be part of Purdue Pharma, which was the main company driving the opioid crisis, which has now been restructured into Noah Pharma. Because all you got to do is change your name and shift the shares around a little bit, and you're good to go. But I'm super down for this. I'll even act in the movie. Like, I'll do it for free. Let me know. Thank you. Thank you. Wishful thinking, Eddie. It's not, though. It is wishful thinking that the left would be strong for now. But like, we can do this. Something like 52% of Republicans demand Medicare for all, or like support Medicare for all. If we started demanding things instead of begging for things, if we started demanding nationalization and worker ownership instead of, saying, can you please tax the rich a little bit more? Government that's controlled completely by the rich, instead of begging the ruling class for a few scraps, if we demanded things, I bet you more people would flock to us. I bet you more people would be like, those guys are serious and those guys have a legitimate plan for taking on the ruling elite, right? But when you beg the ruling elite to tax themselves more so they can pay for your healthcare, they're going to say no. Absolutely not. And then AOC and these petty bourgeois pseudo-socialists are going to be like, I'll fight for Medicare for all for you. Vote for me. You donate money to my campaign. And then once they become a political careerist, they're not going to fight for you. They're not going to do they're not going to do force the vote. They're not going to give up their own political capital and their own relations in Washington, which is literally why AOC said they couldn't do that. You know, it would do a lot of relational damage within the Democratic Party, as if any working class person without healthcare gives a shit about your relationship with Nancy Pelosi, AOC. We're trying to get healthcare here, but they're going to lie to you. They're going to claim that they're fighting for you, and then they're going to not, right? Which is why we got to organize and seize it ourselves. Y'all want anything from 7-Eleven? Yeah, can you get me a slushie? I'm starting to sweat. We need to start implementing the mass line. I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Dr. Phil made money too off of it, off the opioid crisis. That darn Dr. Phil. Big gulp. Let's go. Let's go. I can't believe how big some of those like 7-Eleven soda cups are. Like, I feel bad for Americans. You know, we're just having sugar and garbage thrown at us all the time. Our portions are so big. I got like a small ice cream from Dairy Queen the other day. It was freaking huge. I was like, how is this a small? What the heck does a large look like? 40 ounces of pure garbage. Absolutely. Fake doctor. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Dr. Phil. I don't think I like him that much. Probably better than Phil DeFranco. Jordan Peterson leaves woke feminist speechless. That's the first video that pops up for me. I'm watching way too many reactionary videos for y'all that I can react to on stream. Now I'm just getting recommended these bizarro videos. I'm trying to see if I kind of talked about this on TikTok already, but AMLO, the president of Mexico, has come out and said that the litigation against Trump surrounding hush payments to Stormy Daniels is anti-democratic because it's an effort to influence the 2024 elections, right? It's the Democratic establishment pushing for this. Pushing to arrest Trump because they don't want him to run in 2024, or they want to weaken his electoral campaign, weaken his popularity. And AMLO saying this is an infringement on democracy, right? This is an infringement on the will of the people, that you would try and use lawfare, the legal system, to arrest this guy who might run for president because he might run for president. And it's, you know, like that's what happened to Lula da Silva. He was thrown in jail when he was set to beat Bolsonaro for president. This Judge Moro was the one who ruled that Lula should be sent to jail. And then Judge Moro was appointed by Bolsonaro to his administration. So just blatant corruption. You know, a member of the Bolsonaro administration was literally the judge that ruled Lula should go to jail. And you know, this is something that we've called lawfare, use of the legal system to control politics and control economics and, you know, prevent democracy, any kind of real democracy. So that's what AMLO is saying might be going on in the U.S., which I'm sure that's why the Democrats are pushing for it, right? It's a great point because, you know, you can say what you want about Trump, you know, like I said in the TikTok video I made about this, there are Iraqi courts and Iraqi lawyers who are suing Trump right now for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And it's not going to go anywhere, you know, but it's more symbolic. Like, we're going to sue you to say, you know, you can't just break international law and act as a rogue terrorist state and do whatever you want around the world. So there are, you know, real examples of litigation that should be brought up against Trump. But are the Democrats going after him? because of his imperialism, because of his reckless assassinations of foreign leaders and escalation towards war, because he fired missiles at Syria, or because he allowed for a coup to be perpetrated in Bolivia under his watch, which installed a fascist dictatorship? Is that what the Democrats are coming him after for? No, it's Stormy Daniels, of course, right? It's hush payments to a adult film star, because our politics in this country have to remain an absolute circus at all times. They can't come after him for anything legitimate. But like George Bush has been rehabilitated by the Democratic establishment, the Democratic media. George Bush, John Bolton, Liz Cheney, the architects of the Iraq War, these war criminals who blatantly violated international law, argued that U.S. interests in U.S. domestic law is more important than international law, lied about weapons of mass destruction, used torture to lie us into this murderous intervention, killed millions of people, plundered the resources of Iraq, and have never been brought to justice. Obama said we can't persecute the war criminals from the Bush administration because it would divide the country. But we can persecute Donald Trump for something he did with Stormy Daniels, the porn star. It's just absolute clownery. Our government is an absolute clown show. And now, you have all these, I'm sure there will be a bunch of liberals who are mad at me. You're just a Trump supporter. You're basically a MAGA Republican. Why? Because I'm honest about Trump? Because I have an honest and actual assessment of Trump's role within the American political system. And I recognize that the Democratic establishment's in power right now and they don't want Trump to win in 2024. So they're trying to throw him in jail when there are presidential war criminals still walking around and making millions of dollars to give speaking engagements in this country. When the butcher of Libya, Hillary Clinton, was allowed to run in 2016. Like, if you guys cared about the law, you would go after everyone in power who's broken the law, but you don't. You care about the 2024 election. You care about the Democratic Party and winning, which is why you're coming after Trump, and AMLO is onto it. So yeah, just interesting to hear that from AMLO. Like, I always think it's interesting to hear socialist countries outside the US, how they assess Trump, right? Because they recognize oftentimes that Biden and the Democratic establishment is doing the same thing in terms of economic sanctions and drone strikes and imperialism. And even in terms of the American economy, Republicans and Democrats, there's very, very little difference. And it's easier to see from the outside looking in, right? It's easier to see from like AMLO versus when you're in the US, you often get wrapped up in that political circus. You get wrapped up thinking that the Democrats are somewhat better than the Republicans, so I have to support them no matter what. And it is not true. And it can sometimes blind people to the bad things that the Democrats do, like trying to arrest Trump to influence the election, influence democracy. Yeah. It's also so interesting that it's so funny because the Democrats all have Trump derangement syndrome, and they're like, he's infringing on our sacred democracy by colluding with Russia, even though there's never, ever been any evidence that he was colluding with Russia. Meanwhile, they're trying to get Trump arrested to influence the next election. Like, what about our sacred democracy, guys? Is it a sacred democracy if you're allowed to arrest anybody who challenges you? Doesn't sound very democratic to me. Lately, Republicans have been threatening an invasion of Mexico. True. Beyond the excuses, do you think this has anything to do with AMLO's recent decision to nationalize Mexico's lithium reserves? Coincidence? Could be a coincidence, but not really. It's part of, Mexico is moving in that direction consistently. Mexico has been moving towards anti-imperialism, moving towards nationalizing more resources, moving towards more social programs, moving towards alliances with, China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, the axis of evil, all the U.S.'s enemies. And they've been moving towards being more strict against the U.S., more hard against the U.S., like I said, more anti-imperialist. So, I don't know if those two events were strictly related. Like Lindsey Graham came out recently and said that we should start bombing Mexico and, potentially do a military invasion to get rid of the cartels. which is just absurd. And then, so I don't know if that is linked. And AMLO responded to that and said, obviously, this would be an infringement on our sovereignty. You guys are psychopaths. I think it was probably, I don't think that probably spurred the nationalization of lithium. I think that was probably planned anyways, or something that they had planned to do, but it's all part of the same process, right? Of Mexico moving left or moving towards a more working class government, which is then angering the US, which is angering these imperialists like Lindsey Graham. So like the nationalization of lithium and those type of things are why the US, is increasing hostility towards Mexico. But I don't know if the two events are explicitly linked. I would imagine it was more of a coincidence, but yeah, great question. Thank you for the super chat again, JFlow Grappling Academy. We're getting tons of super chats and super stickers here today. Real successful stream as far as that goes. So thank you, everyone. I think you do have to arrest Trump for denying the results of the election. Frankly, a riot at the Capitol and doing all these bullshit audits for a year is going to be some sort of punishment for trying to circumvent election results. True, but have you seen all the recent reports about the Capitol riot? I think it was probably escalated into a riot by intelligence agency and government psyops. And we've constantly covered how there were a lot of CIA-backed groups like the Falun Gong, Iranian monarchists, Cuban gusanos who showed up at the Capitol riots and were escalating things towards violence. So I don't know. But obviously, I'd be okay with Trump being indicted for some of the stuff that he's actually done wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if there was an invasion of Mexico or a CIA coup against AMLO. That'd be insane. An invasion of Mexico. I wouldn't be surprised either, though. Yeah, Mexico just made education free. They got a few more strikes before United Snakes imperialism manufacturers. Some need for armed struggle against the Mexican working class. A few. Yes, more class struggle in Mexico. And as the working class takes power, you're going to get more ridiculous claims from people like Lindsey Graham that we should invade Mexico. All right, y'all. I think I'm probably going to wrap up the stream here. I've been going for 2 hours. It's been a great stream. I got to go coach wrestling tonight. Also got to get some homework done before I do that. But thank you all for hanging out with me. This has been a great 2 hours. Feel like we all learned a lot. So appreciate you for supporting the streams. Make sure to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that. Check out Carlos's new book on MidwesternMarks.com. Thank you so much to all of our YouTube members. Thank you so much to all of our moderators like Ware Pilgrim here and Jacob and Cobra Commander. Thank you to everyone who sent a super chat. Really appreciate that. Here, Christopher Romero is another YouTube member. Thank you all so much for that. Patreon.com/MidwesternMarks. And yeah, that's all I got for you today. So we'll hopefully see you tomorrow. Solidarity, everyone. Much love.